Good morning, everyone. My name is Valerie Jarrett, and I'm a senior advisor to President Obama. We're delighted to have you here and the outpouring and support and interest in this very important issue. As you've just heard from the President and the First Lady, bullying is a problem that affects us all. And their commitment to end bullying is not just as President and First Lady, but as parents as well. Last week, I mentioned to my daughter that we were planning this conference. Her immediate response was to remind me of a bullying incident that she experienced when she was in kindergarten. Now, we were fortunate. My daughter told her teacher what happened. The teacher immediately informed the principal. The principal took swift and responsible action by explaining to the bullies that their behavior was not acceptable in our school community. She informed the parents of the bullies and me the same day that the incident occurred, and the bullies apologized to my daughter and the parents apologized to me, all before bedtime the same day as the incident. Yet, 20 years later, my daughter still vividly remembers all of the details of that one incident, just as though it had happened last week. And it goes to show that when young people are bullied, even when it's dealt with properly, it can leave a lasting impact. Many of you in this room have had similar experiences, some ending far tragically. But we're here today because we know bullying can be prevented if we all take action together. And luckily, we don't have to start from scratch. The Obama administration, working with many of you here, is already making great strides. The Department of Education has already released 2 guidance letters. One on the obligation of schools to address bullying under civil rights laws, and another on the key components of state anti-bullying laws. The Department of Education is working with the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention to conduct research on bullying, and today, Secretary Duncan announced his intention to establish a new technical assistance center dedicated to bullying prevention. I'm pleased to, yes. I'm pleased to announce two additional resources. First, we're collecting all of our federal responses into one space, as the President mentioned, stopbullying.gov. It's a website that's going to be housed in the Department of Health and Human Services. Stopbullying.gov provides information from various government agencies on how children and teens and young adults and parents and educators and others in the community can prevent or stop bullying. The website provides information on what bullying is, the risk factors, its warning signs, and its effects. It also provides information on how to get help if you need it, or someone you know who needs it is being bullied. Second, our Stop Bullying Now campaign is releasing a new toolkit developed for student leaders who want to help prevent bullying. But we know that the federal government can't solve this problem alone. Many terrific organizations and people, several who are represented here today, have made important contributions. So before we continue, I'd like to thank them for their commitments. The National PTA and the National Association of Student Councils have made important commitments to stopping bullying, and we're so glad to have you join us here today. Please join me in thanking them. The National Education Association is launching a national anti-bullying campaign. Bully free, it starts with me. President Dennis Van Rokel is here today. Thank you, Dennis, for all your help as well. Additionally, the American Federation of Teachers is planning to launch a national bullying campaign called See a Bully, Stop a Bully, Make a Difference. And President Randy Weingarten is here with us. Randy, thank you as well. Today, the National School Boards Association will launch a series of student conversations between boards of education and students about school climate. Their president, Earl Rickman, is here, and let's thank him. also joined by the National Association of Secondary Principals. They're planning to build an online portal that will help prevent cyberbullying. Jane Filler, thank you. Where are you? Right here. Oh, Key corporate leaders are here as well. Cartoon Network is continuing its Stop Bullying Speak Up campaign to encourage bystanders to step in when they see bullying. And Stuart Snyder from Cartoon Network is here. Welcome. The president mentioned MTV and their announcement that they're launching a new coalition that will work to fight bullying and intolerance online. And we have Stephen Freeman from MTV here. Stephen, where are you? Coalition partners include the National Council of La Raza, the Anti-Defamation League, and the American Islamic Relations, GLAAD, and others, many of who are also here. SurveyMonkey has joined us to create a dedicated page for bullying detection, which students can adopt in order to distribute and disseminate. And Phil Garden from SurveyMonkey is here. Phil, where are you? Thank you. And finally, FormSpring, in partnership with MIT, is announcing today the creation of a tool on their site that identifies harassing language to help prevent bullying. Please join me in welcoming Sarah Jane Sacchetti from FormSpring and Henry Lieberman from MIT. Where are you two? And to you terrific young people, your stories are amazing. Thank you for your leadership. Could we thank the students? And now let's get on with our panel discussion. We have with us here today a group of people whose research on the causes and effects of bullying is helping us better understand how to prevent it. I'd like to invite a few of these scholars to join me on the stage to discuss their work. First, we have Sue Swearing, who's an associate professor of the School of Psychology at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln. Sue, please come up and we're going to get some cheers for you guys. Please join us. Thank you, Professor. Justin Patchen is an associate professor of criminal justice at the University of Wisconsin and co-director of the Cyber Bullying Research Center. Professor Patchen, please join us. Catherine Bradshaw is an associate professor of mental health at Johns Hopkins School of Public Health and an associate director of the Johns Hopkins Center for the Prevention of Youth Violence. Professor Bradshaw, welcome, welcome. And George Sugai, a professor of special education at the University of Connecticut and the director of the Center of Behavioral Education and Research. Thank you, Professor, as well. So let's now turn it over to the experts, who will each give a brief overview of their work, and then we're going to answer some questions. Here's some answers for some questions that have been submitted to them online. And with that, we're going to start with Catherine.
Great. Hello, my name is Catherine Bradshaw. I'm associate professor at Johns Hopkins. And the co-director of the Johns Hopkins Center for the Prevention of Youth Violence, which is funded by the Centers for Disease Control. I'm delighted to be here today to talk about our program of research at Johns Hopkins, where we're engaging in collaborative research efforts with multiple stakeholders, including the Maryland State Department of Education, several school districts in the area, as well as some national organizations. A clear aspect of our work is the link between bullying and school climate. This has really been a focus on and a very strong passion for our work that has driven a lot of our research to try to understand the different ways that students perceive the school climate as well as school staff, because that's a very significant predictor of individuals' likelihood of intervening in the way in which children respond when they're actually bullied. Parents also are very sensitive to the school climate, and in fact, parents that perceive the school climate less favorably are less likely to contact the school when they have concerns about bullying. With regard to the intervention research, this is an area where we're engaged in a number of different projects to try to identify what kind of prevention strategies are most effective and what are some critical elements of those prevention programs. And one that has really come out to us is the importance of training teachers, having clear expectations for staff about how to intervene in situations that involve bullying, and specific strategies that they can use to talk with students and report that to the administration in the school building. Similarly, students need to be taught about how to respond when they see bullying, and that needs to happen through direct instruction, as well as certain kinds of curricula that can promote social emotional skills and development that will affect a range of their behaviors as well as their academic performance. I'm very pleased to be here as part of the panel and look forward to some additional questions and comments about the role of parents and community members as it relates to bullying prevention.
Thank you, Kevin. Justin?
Hi, I'm Justin Patchen, and I'm at the University of Wisconsin in Eau Claire. And with my colleague Samir Hinduja, we at the Cyberbullying Research Center have been exploring how teens have been using and misusing technology for about the last 10 years. And even though we have to focus on the negative aspects of technology and what teens are doing to get themselves in trouble online, I do have to point out right at the beginning that the vast majority of teens are doing great things online. They're responsible, they're safe. But there are some teens that do get into trouble, and we've been working for the last 5 or 6 years to try to empower teens to be safe online. We've been studying sort of the prevalence of cyberbullying. We know that about 1 in 5 teens has experienced cyberbullying online. That ranges from very minor things to very serious death threats. And as the president mentioned this morning, we shouldn't just dismiss those things because they're only online and they're not physical. The thing with cyberbullying is it really is all-encompassing and it follows you everywhere. When I was bullied in middle school, I would go home and I could forget about it for a while, but now, kids go home and they've got their computers, their cell phones, their social networking website, and the bullying really follows them home. So I think for many kids, it can really be much worse than traditional bullying. It's not about me, so I'm going to move on so we can get into the meat of trying to figure out a great way to solve this problem. So thanks a lot. I do appreciate being here.
Thanks, Justin. Sue?
Hi, I'm Sue Swear, Associate Professor of School Psychology at the University of Nebraska. My N pin. It's an honor to be here. I've been studying bullying for about a decade, and as a licensed psychologist, I'm very interested in the psychological experiences of kids involved in bullying, both as a bully perpetrator, as a victim, and in a lot of our research at Nebraska is the kids who are both involved in bullying as a bully and as a victim. And so we have found that often kids who are bullied at home or in the neighborhood then go to school and also bully other kids. So it's a very complex dynamic, and that's what I hope will come out of this conference is an understanding of the complexity and the social ecology in which bullying unfolds, and we have to understand that complexity in order to develop effective intervention and prevention strategies. So it's an honor to be here.
Thanks, Sue. And George?
Thank you very much. It's really an honor to be here, and I'd really like to thank President Obama for creating this opportunity for us to have a chance to talk about this important issue. I'd like to also extend our appreciation to the family members that are here and community members who are also very interested in trying to solve this particular challenge and respond to the call to action. I am at the University of Connecticut. I'm in the NEAG School of Education. I'm a professor there. And I also co-direct the National Center on Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports that's funded by the U.S. Department of Education. And what we do is spend quite a bit of our time focusing on what is needed to support all kids inside a school. We've learned that by creating larger school-wide climates that are positive, supportive, and respectful, we can do a better job of responding to the needs of individual kids as well as groups of students. So I come to this event more as a school-wide climate person for which the bullying challenge is being contextualized. And it's very important for us to think about what that looks like. I was also asked in this brief comments to give one message, and I think I have a three-part message that I'd like to share with you. And one is, what can you do? What's the smallest number of things you can do to have the biggest impact? And one of the things I'd like to ask all of you to do, which was already mentioned by Mrs. Obama, which is actively supervise your children, or your students, or your community, because active supervision is one of the most powerful tools we have. The second thing I'd like you to think about is that we need to teach what we want, and we need to recognize kids for doing a good job. We're spending quite a bit of our time punishing and acknowledging kids who are engaged in inappropriate behaviors, and I'd really like us to think about how we acknowledge the kids who are doing a good job and the kids who have challenges who are really struggling to do a good job as well. And the last piece I think I'd like to have you think about is that our academic success is probably one of our best tools for creating environments that are successful as well as supporting individual students. So if each one of us in this room can think about actively supervising, thinking about acknowledging kids for doing a good job, and third, thinking about maximizing academic success as a context for supporting kids with some challenges, I think we could adjourn now. No, I think we could continue this discussion, so thank you very much.
Thank you, George. And now for our questions that have come in online. And the first question, actually, George, leads off of your second piece of advice. And this comes from Jesse Rome in Bloomington, Indiana. And he says, in what ways can we balance the needs of all of our students by providing effective bullying prevention while also not isolating our students with emotional and behavioral disorders who may be more likely to participate in bullying behavior? How can we focus on prevention without focusing too much on the punishment? So I'll start with you, George, and then open it up to anyone else who'd like to answer as well.
Again, I'm going to speak from a larger school climate perspective. I think we have experts to my left who can address the individual kid thing. Our research indicates that the best interventions out there that can support individual students, its effectiveness, its implementation fidelity, is linked to how well the school climate is operating. If you're a student, or if you're a teacher, if you're a parent visiting a school, and you notice that the school is working well, the climate is positive, adults are welcoming children, kids are being successful, then these interventions that others have addressed and have identified are going to be much more effective. So I really am interested in having us think about what the larger school climate looks like. How are all kids being treated? Because what we've learned is you can actually minimize the impact of bullying behaviors, minimize the number of kids who need active support by putting in place a larger school-wide system and become much more efficient in the effective work that we do. So it's not to minimize the individual work. We need to do that. But to make it more appropriate and acceptable, it's about looking at the larger school climate.
Thanks, George. Other comments? Catherine, Sue?
I can start. There certainly is some very important research that has looked at the connection between kids who are identified in special education and involvement in bullying, both as being bullied and also as bully perpetrators. And a very important report that came out looking at bullying among students with disabilities. So it is a huge issue, and it's a really important issue that schools need to deal with head on. So kind of dovetailing from what George said, that we need to create school climates where that's just totally unacceptable, and that it's not acceptable to treat anybody poorly. But we do know it's an important issue, and it is a problem.
Sure. I think one thing that's very clear through the question was recognition that children that do bully also have emotional and behavioral problems that need to be addressed. And this is often something that gets overlooked in the literature when we're focused, importantly so, on the victims, but we do also need to recognize that the perpetrators of bullying are often struggling because of a number of risk factors, maybe exposure to violence in the home or perhaps even a history of victimization themselves. And so we need to think in a tiered approach about how we can intervene appropriately, layering on to those universal or school-wide pieces that Dr. Sagai and I spoke about, more targeted interventions for children that might be in risk for engaging in bullying behavior. And similarly, sometimes more intensive types of supports that include counseling and more intensive therapy is required for children with pretty severe forms of aggressive and disruptive behavior problems. So we need to think in a tiered framework as we approach this issue of bullying to layer on to a school-wide system and a school-wide climate, the more intensive supports provided through mental health and many of our extremely qualified school psychologists across the country.
Thank you. As I mentioned, my daughter came home and told me about her incident, and so did, she told her teachers as well. But a question that we have from Kate Weaver in Lincoln, Nebraska is, how can schools empower their students and parents and faculty and staff to report incidents of bullying, because oftentimes students are hesitant to report incidents due to fear of abuse or retaliation or mistrust, or feel that their reports will be ignored. How can we do a better job of empowering them? And I'd open this also up to everybody.
I can go ahead and start. This question comes up a lot, especially when we're working in some of our urban contexts where there's a great stigma associated with snitching or telling on someone. And that really gets to the issue of norms and the climate in the school and setting a tone about what kind of behaviors and responses to bullying are going to be acceptable. When it comes to staff, the policies and the training that's provided to staff are very critical. And it's extremely important that staff get the message that they can't tolerate bullying behavior and that they need to report all the incidents and intervene effectively and efficiently and immediately when they see bullying happening. Because quite often students will get the impression that it's tolerated if they see teachers or other adults in the school turning a blind eye to this. So that's really one critical element of this equation.
Yeah, in the first study we did on cyberbullying, less than 15% of the targets or victims told an adult about their experience. About 10% told their parent, and about 5% told somebody at school. So we know this is a big issue. And when I talk to students about this, they say, well, we don't want to get in trouble, and we don't want to get blamed, and we don't want to lose our technology because they're afraid that their parents are going to say, well, you're receiving mean text messages. I can solve this. Give me your cell phone, right? Or let's get you off Facebook. And that, of course, is not the solution. You got to remember what it is that victims or targets of bullying want. And it's pretty simple. They just want the bullying to stop. They don't want the offender or the bully to really even get in trouble. They just want it to stop. So I think as those of us who have kids and who work with children, we need to remember that and apply whatever caring and creative and comprehensive response we think is appropriate for that particular situation. And when they see it work, when they see the bullying stop, then children will be more open to coming to us for help. But so far, adults have not done a really good job of convincing students that we're going to do a good job of stopping the bullying.
I think also in terms of some of the consulting work that I do with schools, I'm always struck by the fact that there's a real lack of understanding of federal policy, state policy, their own school policy, and then their school disciplinary referral forms. I mean, everything is very disjointed. So I think schools have a really wonderful opportunity to try to coordinate this effort and work and use office referral forms in a way in which they ought to be constructed and to be helpful. So in terms of this idea of how do we create mechanisms in place for kids to feel I can report this and something will happen. So often kids will say, well, if they do report it, I reported it and nothing happened or it got worse. So we really teach them that reporting leads to some kind of negative effect. But it is, I think, a nice opportunity for schools and school administrators to really look at how they sync all of their forms and how they create opportunities for children to report these behaviors.
I just have two quick comments. One is some of the work that we've done has indicated that the kid has to feel like he's being listened to or she's being listened to, and that there's some relationship between the child and the person they're reporting to. So that tells me again that it's really important for us as adults, teachers, parents, community members, and so forth, to build a relationship with those kids so that the telling, the discussion, the reporting is something that is worthwhile, that's worth investing in telling or describing what's happening. The second thing I want to describe, which is not research, so Catherine will not like this, because my daughter told me, she said, make it simple. Sometimes our reporting systems are so complicated, and there's investigations, and there's reporting, and so forth, that it isn't worth the effort. In fact, it becomes worse. So one of the things I've also learned is that you got to, one, build a relationship with the adult that you want to invest in some time to trust with, but second of all, it's got to be a simple process by which, as Justin indicated, you got to stop it quickly, and you want to make sure that it's taken care of the fast way. So again, I think the government efforts to monitoring is a good thing. The bad thing is that we make it so complicated for kids and family members and others to try to handle it, which is some of the challenge, I think.
Thank you. Justin, this one is for you. With cyberbullying making the headlines these days, could you talk a little bit more about how they relate to traditional forms of bullying?
Sure. I mean, in behavior, in action, they're very similar in terms of harassment, threats, mean names called, gossip, rumors, whatever. There are some unique differences, and some of those the President touched on and some I touched on earlier from the sense that it's harder to escape cyberbullying because it seems like it's everywhere. You can be bullied at school, bullied on the way home, bullied at home. I mean, kids these days have cell phones with them wherever they go. I was at a school the other day, and I was talking to 3rd and 4th graders, and 40 or 50% of the 3rd and 4th graders had cell phones, and they carry these devices with them all the time. And so they've come to expect that they have online access 24/7. Therefore, the cyberbullying can really affect them very deeply. What's interesting in our research, we explored a little bit the relationship between traditional bullying and cyberbullying, and we had this theory in our mind that the traditional bullying victim, you think about the stereotypical victim as maybe small and socially awkward, but they're smart, right? So maybe they become the bully online, right? But actually, we didn't find that at all. What we found was those who are bullied at school are bullied online, and those who bully at school bully online. It's the same kids being involved in similar behaviors, just different environments. I could go on for another hour, I really could.
We'll give you more opportunity. One thing that parents worry about is how they can protect their children from bullying. What should parents do if they find out that their child is being bullied? I'd open that up as well to everyone.
Well, I think the first thing that's very clear is a parent needs to talk directly to their children about the issue. We've recently completed a study around this, and we were very pleased to see that about 95% of parents said that they did actually talk to their children when they were bullied. I am a bit concerned about the remaining 5% that didn't. And the conversations that parents have with their children around bullying are very critical. They need to be able to support the child, not blame the child, recognize that the bullying is inappropriate and unjustified and unacceptable, but also provide some coaching to the child about how to respond and how to respond in a positive way, and try to develop some strategies that might help them avoid situations of bullying and involve their peers and rely on their peer network, continue communicating with the parents. And we have to be very careful about not encouraging students to fight back. This is an area that we encounter a lot with parents, because parents certainly want to defend their children and they want the best for their children. But we as adults have to be very clear about our communication and that we don't want the situation to escalate. So we have to be thinking creatively about how we can support children in giving them effective strategies. There also are going to be students that are going to need more intensive intervention that might require mental health supports either through the community or through the school, and parents can serve as real advocates and resources for their children around that issue.
Just a quick comment from the cyberbullying side. I think it's important that parents are online. I mean, one of the questions asked to me often is, what can a parent do to prevent cyberbullying? And the first thing is they need to be in the picture. If your child is on Facebook, you need to be on Facebook. You need to be friends with them. They might not like that, but I actually try to convince the child, the youth, that it's in their best interest to be friends with their parents on Facebook or whatever social networking website it is, because they hear all of the problems in the media about teens getting in trouble and doing bad things. And I say it's your responsibility to show your parents that you're not doing those things. You are safe, you're responsible, you're smart. Now, the parents might not know the technology, but they certainly know it's dangerous, perhaps, to be friends with people you don't know in real life, or to put your cell phone number up there for anybody to see it. And so they can key in, the parents can, on some of the potential risk factors for problematic behavior, whether or not it's bullying or something much worse. So just important for all adults and parents especially to be online and be involved in what teens are doing online.
Our data are not as positive as Catherine's data. In our data, typically only about 40 to 50% of kids say that they tell their parents about the bullying. And so that obviously is very concerning. And so I'm a huge advocate of schools collecting data on this issue, on the issue of bullying every year. And one of the questions ought to be, did you tell your parents about the bullying that happened to you? So that then, the schools and the adults have a sense of what is going on in terms of the communication between kids and parents about the bullying. And so I think it's certainly important that schools collect data annually to address some of these questions and get a sense of what's going on in their community.
I have two quick comments about it. And one is, I think it's really important that if you establish a bullying policy or procedures, that it is taught and actively engaged in throughout the school year. It's too late after the bullying event has happened. And we want parents, teachers, and others to know what that process is by which they can communicate with the school. The second point that I think is important is that every single kid inside a school should have at least one adult who they believe they can talk to. It could be parent, it could be teacher, it could be the custodian, but we want to make sure that every adult has someone that they feel free to talk to, because without that, we've got the problem that was described earlier where only 40% of the kids feel like they're comfortable talking to. We don't want the 40%, we want 100% of the kids saying they have at least one adult that they can communicate with. So in much of our work, it's about building that relationship with those kids, having at least one adult who can connect with at least one kid so they feel trusting to be able to talk, and also to, before it becomes a major event, we deal with the teasing early before it becomes something more tragic.
Thank you, George. And following up a bit on what you just said, we have many teachers and administrators who are here today. So the final question we have is really what more could we do to make sure that teaching our young folks about bullying is incorporated into the curriculum of our schools? Who'd like to answer that?
I can start with cyberbullying. I think, because technology is becoming such an important part of the educational process, but I see a lot of schools really fighting it. And, it's a concern because there are a lot of problems that students can bring into the school with their technological devices, but there are a lot of great things too. So I think we need to work through some of those issues and really focus on the negative behavior instead of the technology. It's not the cell phone's fault that mean text messages are being sent, right? So from an education standpoint, certainly administrators, teachers, everybody in the school environment needs to have a clear sense of what cyberbullying is and what they as a school can do about it. A lot of times I think schools don't know what they can do, especially when the behaviors originate away from school, but as we all know, those of us who work with students know, eventually it ends up on the teacher's laps or the assistant principal's laps. And so I think it's important for all schools to be prepared for those kinds of instances. So whether it's training the counselors, the teachers, the staff, and how do we respond to these issues effectively? And again, it's not rocket science. It's the same way we've been dealing with problematic relationships among adolescents for generations. It's just involving another environment. And so making sure that everybody in the school is on the same page in terms of how to respond to those behaviors is really important.
There are also a number of curricula that have been developed to try to address this issue, and our approach is always to be more holistic, as Justin was just mentioning, rather than focusing just on one particular form or even just bullying specifically, thinking about a range of pro-social behaviors that you want to foster in all children and helping them develop those skills through, say, for example, a behavior modification type of intervention, a school-wide climate promoting activities, and social-emotional learning curricula. So that way you give children the competencies and the skills to be able to navigate a range of interactions that they'll have with others, including bullying. But we do need to be able to have some specific strategies and training that's provided to students about how to deal with that. The trick is finding the time to do all of this. We researchers come up with all these programs and say, oh, this is a good package program, or why don't you spend minutes doing that? And we know there's incredible burden on teachers and school staff to be able to demonstrate academic gains. And that's why it's important to recognize the link between bullying and a negative school climate and academic performance, that we anticipate that teachers spending time dedicating to these activities to promote positive outcomes for students and to prevent bullying is actually going to save some time for them on the back end and promote more positive outcomes for students, including achievement.
Just a couple quick comments, and again, it goes back to what I just said in my introductory comments. I think there's a lot of good programmatic kind of options for kids and schools as a whole, but I'd argue that every teacher, every principal, every playground monitor and so forth should have those three basics in place. Actively supervise, teach what you want, let kids know they're doing a good job and so forth. We know that that will capture many of the students, not all, but many of the students. I'm a researcher, but I also follow the advice of my wife, which is a smart thing to do. She's a principal of a school. You walk into her building, and the first thing you'll notice that there are 3 core values that are taught to all the kids on the first day of school. And those 3 core values serve as the communication means for the rest of the kids across the classrooms. The other thing you should know about that is that it's also being taught in non-classroom settings. And when you're worried about the issue we're worried about, it's not necessarily in the classroom. It's hallways, bathrooms, sporting events, dances, on the bus, where we have our big issues, where active supervision, teaching the routines, and so forth is so important. So if you think about schools as a whole and what can we do, I teach courses on classroom management and school discipline. And yeah, you can set the rules, you can set the rule violation consequences, but what's really important is establishing those critical strategies that will capture most of the kids and provide a respectful environment for them so that there is a means for communication. So follow the wisdom of my wife and make sure that you do kind of actively supervise and acknowledge kids for doing a good job.
Just one final comment, if I can. From a legislative standpoint, there are about 45 states that have laws on bullying now, and last I checked, about 30 of those included language about electronic harassment. The problem I see with those laws, though, is they take it from this standpoint. Cyberbullying is a problem. Schools, you need to do something about it. And that's it. They don't say what they should do. They don't say how they should do it. They don't say anything about the circumstances under which they should intervene, and they certainly don't provide any resources to do it. So I think, our laws need to be updated to provide more tools for schools to do exactly what we've been talking about. And I think there's some information in the materials from the conference today that is a step in the right direction. So thank you.
Thank you, Justin. And actually, that's a nice segue into another announcement that I wanted to make. Facebook has come up a couple of times since we've been talking, and Facebook will be unveiling 2 new safety features in the coming weeks. The first one is a revamp of their multimedia safety center to incorporate multimedia, external sources from renowned experts, and downloading information for teens. So we're glad that Facebook will be doing that. And additionally, they will create a new social reporting system to enable people to report content that violates the Facebook policies so that they can be removed as soon as possible, while notifying parents and teachers of its contents so that the reasons for its posting can be addressed. So we really want to commend Facebook for taking those 2 important steps as well. So this concludes our panel. Please join me in thanking George and Justin and Sue and Catherine. We are so pleased that you could all join us. And now we're going to put everybody else to work, and we're going to have breakout sessions. And Will Joanda is going to come up and walk us through where we go from here. Will? Thank you, everyone.